Okay, as your conversations keep going, we're not going to walk the mic around today. We're going to make this a little briefer this morning, and we're just going to do a raising of hands. So all of you who are just excited to tell me about how right you are, you don't get that opportunity, okay? What you do get an opportunity to do is, with a show of hands, let's talk about it. How many of you struggle with always being right? Nobody. Okay, now, as Michelle mentioned earlier, and I think someone else mentioned, who doesn't struggle with it? You just always are right. Okay, great. All right, great. It's perfect. Okay. Why struggle? Just do it, right? Why does that have to be hard, right? Now, for those of you who didn't raise your hands, which was a lot of people, so either you're being really dishonest or, maybe you legitimately don't have this problem. Maybe you're like some other people in my life, because I am one of those people, as we talked about last week. Maybe you struggle, and maybe you're being worn down by those people who think they're right? And maybe you're just like, man, I just want to live a life where I don't have to be told I'm wrong all the time. Can I just have one win, right, guys? Right, just one win? No, not one win. You don't get one win, right? So it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle in both directions, and can really be a point of offense, a major point of offense, because people who desire to be right all the time get offended by all the knuckleheads who can't see how right they are, right? That's what happens. And the knuckleheads are offended because they can't seem to understand why they can never be right. So there's both these offenses where you're struggling back and forth. And so today, to help sort this out and to help maybe overcome this struggle in our lives and work on what we've been doing this past month, which is not being offended, we're going to start with a story that Jesus told in Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 13. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app, it's really easy on an app. You just flick to Luke. But if you have a Bible, I encourage you to turn there, because I just don't want you to take my word for anything that's said. Go to the actual Word of God, unpack it, unfurl it. Let's talk about it together, and let's see what God is saying as we go through this. Now, if you don't have a Bible or a Bible app on you, I get it. That's okay. We're going to throw it up on the screen here as well so you can follow along. And in the cafe, it'll be up on the screen. And while you're turning to Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 13, we're going to give you some context. Luke is recording here a series of teachings that Jesus was giving as he's passing through the countryside of Judea and Samaria. And everywhere he's going, he's followed by a few big groups of people. He's followed by a group of Pharisees and scribes, which are teachers of the Mosaic law, the respected men who really everyone looked up to, everyone thought was really righteous and holy. They thought, man, if I could be like anybody, if I could be like them, that would be great. All right? And they were also followed by crowds who were just made up of the commoners and just people just living everyday lives. They were farmers, they were traders, they were merchants, they were tax collectors. And the Pharisees often looked down on these people as less than. It's like, oh, they couldn't make it as a Pharisee. They're just these common people. And then they have the disciples of Jesus who were following Jesus around everywhere, just trying to soak up as much time with him as possible because he was so different from both those groups. Like, man, I just got to find out, why is he so different? And so they lean in and they're following around wherever he goes. And so Luke records the teachings here as his groups follow Jesus around the countryside. And Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, and he talks about when it's finally going to arrive, and he talks about prayer. And then Luke records these next words of Jesus in verses 9 through 14. It says, "He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. He said, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, 'God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give the tithe of all that I get.' But the tax collector, standing off, would not even lift his eyes up to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, 'God, be merciful to me, a sinner.' Jesus says, 'I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted.'" What's so interesting to me about this text? There's a lot. What's so interesting to me about this text is that the Pharisee saw himself as right. He was right. And the tax collector is just completely on the opposite side as wrong. But to Jesus, it wasn't just about right and wrong. It was about pride and humility. In part because proud people don't love well. Right? Now, if you were to place yourself in Jesus' story, would you think about it yourself? You don't have to answer out loud or point fingers, but would you be the Pharisee or would you be the tax collector? Don't answer that one or raise your hands. Now, we've been in this series in this No Offense series for a couple of weeks now because there's so much tension and so many people are right about what they believe. They're completely convinced. And you got people on opposite sides of their rightness completely going back and forth, backbiting and arguing all the time. There's so much discord and divide. And unfortunately, as Christians, as Jesus followers, if we're not careful, it's really easy for us to slip into our own righteousness and our own spiritual pride, much like this Pharisee that Jesus was talking about in his story. In fact, I would say respectfully that with all good intentions, sometimes those who follow Jesus, we tend to think our job is to be right. We got it all figured out, right? We have the book to go back to. We have all the teachings to go back to. We know the man to go back to figuring out what's right and what's wrong. We think, man, that's our job. We got to know what's right. We speak the truth. And if we speak the truth, then we're right, which is partially true. But because we're right, sometimes we get offended by those who are wrong. Sometimes we see others outside of ourselves and we can find ourselves being offended by something they do that we think that's not how it's supposed to be. That is wrong way of living. We're offended by what they post or by how they vote or what they believe or how they behave. And if we live offended long enough, what happens is that offense starts to settle into our heart. And as that offense starts to settle into our heart, it starts to simmer and it starts to grow, and it grows from just mere offense to starts to be contempt. And you start looking at other people who are different than you and who believe differently than you and struggle with the same things you do, but you try to do something about it, whatever that looks like, and you start to see that and you begin to hold them in contempt. And if we're not careful, we start to move even from contempt and begin to hate not just what they do, but who they are. They're the other. We talked about that last week. There are those people, right? They're the ones that we just don't want to associate with. They're so wrong. How could I ever sit and talk with someone like that? I just can't do it, right? It's a real slippery slope. We're called to be discerning. I will grant you that. We are called to be, if you're following Christ, and now if you're in this room today, we believe and hope and pray that this room is filled with people who don't follow Jesus yet. But if you do, we're called to be discerning. We're called to be holy as God is holy. But in pursuit of that, what happens is we start to build up divisions between us and them. We won't say we're judging people, but we'll say is I'm assessing, right? I'm assessing the situation. I'm trying to discern what's going on around me. So if I was asked by somebody else, so what do you think of that person over there? I'll start to do an assessment. I'll start to discern if I'm really spiritual of myself. And I'll think, man, they're all right, an okay guy, but he's way too into himself. Right? Or maybe she's great at what she does, but she lets her kids just run crazy. Maybe she has no control over those kids. We feel it's our job to assess because we're right. We even do this in churches, say, I'm right about my theology. We're right about churches around us. Just do a few YouTube videos or personal study, and we could be armed with just enough truth to assess everything and anyone everywhere. We know what the good churches are. We know where the bad churches are. We know because we're right, and that church is either too shallow or it's too boring. It doesn't teach the right stuff or it doesn't believe the right way. And we do all these things where we divide, and separate ourselves from everyone and everything. It's really easy to feel good about our own rightness. I know. I struggle with being right. But too often what happens is we struggle in our rightness and we get into feeling good about our rightness and being right. I've got it all figured out. We begin to do it at the expense of somebody else. The Pharisee was right and he knew it. So he tells everyone else how right he is and he looks down on those who are wrong, and sometimes without meaning to, we do the exact same thing. We do it. Let's be honest. All right, it's okay to be honest in church, all right? This building will fall down, but it's not because of you, okay? All right, it's just old, And so we got to be honest with it. And so we do the exact same thing. We'll look and say, well, they shouldn't be spending their money that way. How do they get that truck? I can't afford to get that truck, and I work a full-time job, and I make overtime, I do all this stuff. How can they do that, right? If I had money, I wouldn't spend it like that, right? I can tell you how to dress, and I can tell you that she needs to exercise more because she's gaining too much winter weight, and it's not even really winter yet. And I can tell you all these things, right? And we tend to think we're the best assessors. We've got it all figured out, that we are the most right. But here's the rub. We're not only at war with an external spiritual enemy that we talked about last week, but we're very much at war with an internal enemy, us. The Bible calls it the flesh, and even if you're a trusting, believing follower of Jesus, every day is a battle between God's will and your will. Every day. Every single one, I guarantee you. And we hold tightly to our rightness, often failing to recognize it's really pride. Now, that might be hard to hear, but the reality is that sometimes even those of us who are right a lot are often wrong. Your opinion may be wrong, your sources may be wrong, your feelings, I can guarantee you most of the time are wrong, right? I can almost guarantee that. And you don't want to know, if you struggle with those things, you're like, but I understand, Pastor, but I really struggle with this. You want to know why you struggle with these things? I'll tell you why I struggle with it. Because you think when you're finally forced to admit it, when you're finally forced to let go of your rightness, that you'll be exposed as a failure. That the whole world you've built for yourself will come crashing down and you're left standing alone in the rubble. Because your rightness is what makes you, is what gives you your value, is what makes you important. I spent years, I lived this out. I struggle with this. I've spent years of my early life when I was in my 20s, young 20s, and I thought I had everything. I thought I had everything figured out when I was in my teen years, and I was like, well, I don't quite have everything figured out, so I'm really going to get it right in my 20s. And so in my early 20s, I started to drill down, and I got it all right. I got it pinpointed down, right? I began to spend my years proving my worth through my rightness, through being the one that has all the answers, because being right provides value, doesn't it? Being right means whenever someone's struggling, they look to you and you say, well, what do you think? And you give them an answer and they're like, oh, that sounds good. And you're like, ooh, that does sound good, doesn't it? All right, I like that, right? Now, some of you don't know what that feels like, but it does happen, right? Sometimes it happens. And somebody does that. So what I did is I spent my early years striving to know as much as possible so I could be right at as many things as I possibly could. I went through college. I studied every theological position, every issue, every church philosophy, how to reach people, what to believe about the beginning of the world, what to believe about the end of the world, what to believe about all major religions, why the Catholics are wrong, why the Protestants screwed things up. And I got all my ducks in a row so I could give every single possible answer that I could give. Now, I won't say that those years were a complete waste because God has taught me through it all. But what I will say is that I missed the point. Jesus didn't call me to be right. He called me to be humble and obedient and to follow the only one who is perfect and right and to lead others to him too. That's it. That's all he did. That's all he requires. But maybe you really are right. Maybe you're really, really right. Maybe you're really, really, really right. Like I do, Pastor, I understand you may struggle with this, but I'm right. I got this down, right? But what if you're right, but you're not loving? What if there are Jesus followers who are right, but they're rude, right? What if there are Christians that are right, but they're a jerk, and all they're doing is making a point, but not really making a difference? Jesus wasn't just concerned about right and wrong. He was concerned about pride. He was concerned about humility. It's not just about knowing the truth. It's about conveying the truth in love through that humility. Now, let me give you an example, a little personal example. I love personal examples because, I can argue with myself if I'm right or not. So let me give you a personal example. Not all of this is going to be true, okay? So let me lay this out for you. So if you got your ears tuned in and you missed this part of the message, you're going to completely think this is whack, okay? So let me tell you, not all of the things I'm about to say is going to be true, but let's pretend that it is, okay? Let's just pretend for a moment that this is true. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself, and I'm going to ask you if you like me more or if you're going to want to follow Jesus more faithfully because of how amazing I am, okay? That's what I'm going to do, and be prepared because I'm really amazing, all right? Just to let you know. You're going to be overwhelmed. Just go ahead and check yourself, all right? So let me tell you a little bit more about myself and how right I am and all the right things I do. Jen and I, here's the thing, here's how right we are. We tithe 10% of our income every single week. And we give above and beyond that 10% in tithes and offerings. Somebody needs something, I give money. Carrie needs to go to Guatemala, I give money. Someone else goes somewhere, I'll give whatever. I'll give my time, talent, and treasure to whoever, whatever, however. I rarely watch mature TV. All right, anything that's bad, got some bad language in it, got some, some sexy scenes, all right, got all this stuff. I don't do that. I don't watch that because I don't want to put that unholy stuff in my head, right? But if it does happen to slip on, I've got a filter so that if it does, I'm going to miss the bad parts and only see the good parts, right? Right? That's how holy I am. That's how right I am, right? How holy my wife and I are, we didn't even have sex before we got married. That's how holy we are, right? We didn't even think about it. We didn't even think about it. I've never been drunk. And I've never smoked pot that I remember. I eat a high-protein, low-carb diet, right? I do. I work out 5 days a week. And none of my kids, shh, you can't tell the truth. I work out 5 days a week, and I take my wife on a weekly date, and guess what? We pay off our credit cards every month so we don't accrue interest. That's how right I am, right? Yeah, that's how right I am. Now, laying all that out for you, all that perfection, all that rightness, do you want to follow Jesus anymore because of how holy I am? No. At least I hope you don't. I hope you don't. I really hope you don't, because we have to understand that people aren't drawn to Christ by our moral superiority. We are right. I have all the right answers. I have all the right people to vote for. I have all the right positions. I have all these things laid out. Let me tell you so you can be educated, because you're so wrong. People aren't drawn to Christ by moral superiority. They're not drawn to Christ by how right we are. And how the reason I know is you look at the life of Jesus. What's so fascinating about Jesus? That he was the most right person that ever lived and ever will. The most right, the one who could always say, he would never say a single word wrong. Everything he said and did was right. Yet people who were considered very much in the wrong flocked to him all the time. These who were imperfect, people who were full of darkness and brokenness and sinfulness and secrets, they felt drawn to him. Jesus, this perfect, right, holy person, would go to parties and sinners would flock all over him. They enjoyed being in his company and loved being with them. There was even a time where this prostitute came in and was so moved by the love and grace and glory of Jesus, she knelt down at his feet and she worshiped him, pouring out very expensive oil and perfume all over him. There's this other time where he saw this tax collector, this really hated and despised guy that had extorted people all the time. He was just this horrible person that would have stolen money from his own people to pay to the Romans, who would then turn around and use it to subject and oppress his own people. People were ready to kill this guy, and yet Jesus called him down and said, today I'm going to eat in your house. And so he sat in that man's house, and they had dinner when everyone else wanted to string this man up. There was this woman who couldn't even seem to hold a relationship together. She went from bed to bed, from man to man, spent time loving and offering all these things out, trying to fill what she was really looking for. And Jesus sat down with her, and he gave her living water, which was going to fill her up and the emptiness in her in a way that nothing she pursued could. You see, he was perfect, he was without sin, and yet he drew sinful people to himself. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that sinful, broken people wanted to be around Jesus? Here's what I think. I think they saw in him one who loved them enough to meet them in their brokenness, to see them where at their lowest, to see them and everyone else had turned against them and they were sitting in the middle of this crowd, but they were so alone. To see them when they were faulted and so broken and messed up and lashing out at others and hurting others. And Jesus would see them at their worst, and he loved them enough to not say, you got to fix it. I'm right, you're wrong. But he loved them in their brokenness and bring them in through that love into his perfect presence, so that when they came into contact with that amazing grace and mercy and love that is Jesus, they could then hear his words of life and of truth. We go to people on the street. I'm not against street evangelism by any method or any way. I'm not saying don't stand on the street and preach Jesus or go door to door. Whatever it is you feel God calling you to do it. But we do these things and say, oh, can I tell you how you need to be saved? And people say, I don't know, I need to be saved from anything. Rescued from what? What do you mean? Jesus didn't go do that. Jesus sat in the dining room table of the tax collector. Jesus sat by the bedside of those hurting. He would go to the demoniac, who everybody ran around from and was go away from, and he'd pursue it, and he'd go right to the root of the problem. Not to convince them they're wrong, but to love them till they could hear that he was right. Near the end of his earthly life, he would show that humble, that incredibly powerful love in the most profound way. I love this part of Jesus' story. There's so many great, it's all great, but this part gets me every time. The very end of his life in the upper room filled with his closest friends and with one who would betray him, which always trips me out. Jesus, who knows these things, he knows is the one who's going to betray him, yet he gathers in the room his final night before his death, and they all come around the table together. They sit around and they're having a laugh and they're having a good time. It's all fun. It's they're having a worshipful, amazing time together, and he knows someone's going to betray him, and yet here's what it says in John 13, verse 1. He said, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of the world to the Father, I love this line in John, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Even Judas. Now, what did he do? John says he loved them to the end. How did he do that? The night before his crucifixion, they're sitting around the table. They're having this very intimate supper. Jesus gets up and he shocks every single person in the room that night. He takes off his outer robe and he goes and puts on a slave's apron. And he kneels down in front of the disciples and he does this incredibly shocking thing. He begins to wash their feet. Something that only a slave would do. And he loves them in this most humble, most servant act, and they're shaken. They're stunned by it. They're rattled. Like, why would he do this? He's the Lord. We've seen him calm the seas. We've seen him heal people. We've seen demons flee. We've seen all these amazing miracles. We've seen him, as he says, the kingdom of God has come here and now. And yet the king of that kingdom is kneeling and washing my feet, a tax collector, a fisherman, a sinner, a betrayer. Yet he's doing that. After he finishes, he goes back to eating and he says, one of you will betray me. And Judas, the one who will betray, realizes it's him. And Jesus said, what you do, just go quickly and do it. And Judas leaves the room and goes off to betray Jesus. And all this is going on around him. This is the context. And he knows the suffering that's coming, but he's loving them and serving them sacrificially, humbly, by washing their dirty feet, all the while he's being betrayed by one of his closest friends. And then he says this in verse 33. He says, little children. These aren't just his friends or followers. These are his family, little children. He says, yet a little while I'm with you, you'll seek me, just as I said to the Jews, so I say and also to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. But then he says this verse. He says, a new commandment I give to you. New in the Greek means fresh. It means not worn out. He says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you're also to love one another. How will they know? How will the others, the ones we love to put up dividing walls between, the ones we love to say those are those people who are wrong or they don't do the right things or we can't ever agree, how will they know if we who profess to follow Jesus actually do? How will they know if we follow him? How will they know and tell that we're different than? They won't know that we're his disciples by what we're against. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus didn't say draft up a list of priorities and a list of things that you need to stand against to make sure everybody knows what you're for and make sure you do all that and you're really staunch in your positions and you never give in and you're always right about these things. He didn't say that. He said, you won't know his disciples by how we vote or what we post or how right we are. He said, you will know we belong to Jesus by the way that we love each other in and out of this church. So why do we not often love others the way Jesus loved us? The answer could be because we're too concerned about being right. Jesus was concerned with right and wrong, but he was also concerned with pride and humility. Because when we start with the prideful stance, it's very easy to become judgmental of those who aren't right, of those who are different, of those who are wrong that we feel is. And because I feel superior and I'm judgmental, it's really easy for me to become angered and offended about what they're doing and how it's wrong, and which is incredibly unfortunate because that's how many of us live today. And that's exactly what the opposite of what Jesus was. He was the most right person ever, but also the most loving. Instead of being right, angry, and offended, we should be overwhelmed with the righteous love of Christ, realizing that we've been given an immeasurable gift, forgiven of all our wrongs in a way that we could never deserve. And when we understand and internalize that, we can then prayerfully interact with others with a posture of forgiveness, with a posture of gratitude and of love and of grace. And instead of being right and ineffective, we can be humble and we can be loving. We can still share the truth because there is a capital T truth out there. There's no denying that. but do it in an effective way, because we don't change people by judging them, but by loving them. Now, for believers, it was the Apostle Paul who said this. He said, if I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge and have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor and give my body over to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I have nothing. We could say, if I read my Bible every day but have not love, am I really making a difference? If I go to church every single weekend and have the right views about everything but do not have love, am I not really doing what Christ has called me to do? By the way you love one another, this is how others know that you follow Jesus. So who are we? If you follow Christ and you're here at Faith, we're the body of Christ. We are the church of Christ. We are the light shining in a dark world, and prayerfully we lead with love and not with our rightness, because to Jesus it wasn't just about right and wrong. It was about pride and humility, because proud people don't love well, but humble people, forgiven people, love people who are hurting, love people who are broken, love people who are need of such the grace and mercy of Christ, just like I need the grace of Jesus. Jesus didn't call us to be right. He called us to the truth, but he never ever told us they'll know us by our rightness, but they'll know us by our love. Now, for non-believers, my prayer nearly every day is that's what you'll find here at Faith. Every time. One of my biggest things as pastor of a local church here in Pownell, Vermont, isn't so much, are we doing the right programs? Are we doing the right outreaches? Are we loving well? That's the standard. You know, what is Faith about? What do we do? What do we don't do? How do we do this? How do we not do that? Why are we pursuing all these initiatives? Why do we give meals at Thanksgiving? Why do we do Christmas giving trees? Why do we go to Ladbroke to feed people? Why do we come here on a Sunday morning and desire to come? Not because we have to. Why do we desire to be gathered here in this space every Sunday morning? I praise because we love well. Because we've been loved by this God. Despite our brokenness, despite our wrongness, and he's forgiven and given us mercy and grace, and he's called us to love each other and love others like that. So I pray when you come into this space, if you're not a Jesus follower, you realize here's the real truth. We are far from perfect. I am not the best communicator, right? John and I were talking earlier. He's like, well, what's our mission? What's our vision statement again? I'm like, I've not done a good enough job of communicating that, right? I'm not. And you're going to find a bunch of imperfect people through here because we're not perfect. We're going to fall short of the goal that we set more often than we hit it. But what I pray you find here at Faith, what I pray that I model for you, not because I want to be right, but because I strive for this, I struggle for this in my daily life. I pray that you find a people that are humble. I pray that you find people that aren't puffed up. I pray you find people that are less concerned with being right than loving people and walking alongside the only one who is. This church is a home for the spiritual wanderers. This is the home for people who are on a journey. And our goal is to show and tell you what that journey looks like when you're walking with Jesus. If you're on that journey, maybe you haven't followed Christ yet, or you still don't quite know, and you're on that journey yet, and you aren't quite ready to go all in, I want to let you know I understand that. We're going to give you an opportunity to do that in a minute, but I want you to understand that on a journey with Christ, committing to him is a major life-altering commitment that you need to be certain of. I don't want anyone come to me and say, oh yeah, I said yes to Jesus today, and then you walk out the door and live the exact same way you live, because no, you might have said yes to Jesus, but you didn't commit to living your life for him. And then when you go out and say, oh, I went to Faith and I said yes to Jesus, and then they see you and they're like, oh, that's what Faith Church does? that looks like what I do. What's the difference? Then you missed it. It's a life-altering commitment to commit your life to Christ. So don't do it until you know that you're ready. But in the meantime, I don't want you to say, well, I don't belong here if I don't do that. No, you belong here. It's exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the people that we want you to walk alongside of. I want you to keep coming on Sundays. I want you to get connected to one of our groups that we have going on. I want you to pitch in and serve with us. Go serve meals at Ladbroke with us, or give away the baskets with us for Thanksgiving, or do whatever you can. Just walk alongside of us, and prayerfully what you'll see is Jesus in action here. That's our goal. That's our goal. Now, if you are ready, and maybe you've been coming for a while, or maybe you've been working on it, processing and thinking, well, what does this look like for my life? And you've been hearing about how you can live unoffended. And the reality is that you can take these tips, you can take these whatever tricks, however you want to call them, and you can think, well, if I just do these things, then I'm going to live a more unoffendable life, all right? I don't have to be right. I can be wrong. I'll be humble. You can practice these things, and your life will get better because of them. I'll guarantee that. Because there's wisdom that God has woven into the world where you can practice his way of living even if you haven't committed to him, and you will live a better life, but you will not live the life he has for you until you commit to making him in charge of everything in you. I mean everything. It's a daily struggle to be able to conform our will to God's will. And so what we want to offer you today is an opportunity to take the first and biggest step, which is to submit your will to his and say, today, Lord, I need you. Because the only way you can truly live unoffendable, the only way you can truly begin to put down your need to be right, that desire to have value that your rightness gives you, is to be able to come to Christ and know that he gives you everything you need. If all of you left here this morning and never came back, I would not be of any less value in the eyes of Christ than I am right now. I don't have to be right. I don't have to preach to a room of 100. I have to trust and follow after Jesus. And that's what he calls of you too. And so if that's you and you're ready to make that commitment, what you do is you do it through prayer. So as heads are bowed and eyes are closed. Only because we want you to focus as the worship team comes up. We want you to focus because what's, again, happening here isn't just me giving you a good little pep talk, which I'm happy to do. But it's about opening space and allowing the very presence of the living God to enter in. He's already been in here and working in you through this message. He's been working in me. But what he's doing now is he's calling you, if you haven't committed to following after him yet, is calling you to realize that you are in need of that love and grace. That's the only way you're going to let go of being right. That's the only way you're going to stop being offended by those who think they're right and have hurt you because of their rightness. It's the only way you live. Period. And so if that's you, you recognize that, man, I've fallen short of the glory of God. I've fallen short of what he has for my life. I live this offended life. I live hurt. I live broken. I live all these ways, and I can't get out of this cycle. And you realize that Christ has come to break that cycle in your life, that he is the way, the truth, and the life. There is no one else or nothing else that can solve this equation, that can fix this hole in your heart, that can help you and empower you to live differently than before, transformed than him. And so if that's you and you're like, well, I'm ready today to commit my life to serving him, to aligning my will with his in everything, my finances, my marriage, my friend circle, my career, my every single piece of my life, I'm laying at the foot of the cross and saying, this is yours, Lord, and not mine anymore. I don't get to decide. My decision is to choose you over me in every piece of my life. If that's you, you respond through prayer. It doesn't have to be these words, but words like this. Saying, dear Jesus, first of all, I'm sorry. I've lived a life being really, really, really right. And I've convinced myself or been convinced by others that that's how I have value. That is my worth. If I'm not right, what am I? If I don't have all the right answers, what does that make me? I don't feel effective. I don't feel full of purpose. I feel lost. So today, God, it hurts. It's hard. But I lay down my right to be right at your feet. And I choose to allow you to wash me from the head down to the toes of my feet, into my very heart. God, wash me clean of the hurt, of the offense, of the guilt. God, knowing you have forgiven me in a way no one else can. And now I can live today, not in rightness, but in humility, being loved by someone who doesn't care how right or wrong I am, but who sees me as I am and takes me and transforms my life. Now, if that's you and you prayed that prayer, or one like it, you could have been more of just simply saying, take me, Lord. Whatever it was, then I want to encourage you to not leave here today without telling either myself, John or Danny, they play guitars on stage. They'll talk to you. Michaela, who was up here about Grief Share, she would love to talk to you. Carrie in the back, so many people, anybody you know who you think follows Jesus. Tell them I said yes to Jesus today. Because what happens next is you get welcomed into a family, a very flawed, a very imperfect, a very messy family, but prayerfully ones who love God and will love you through that mess that we all have. The journey just starts. It's the beginning. Find somebody and tell them I said yes to Jesus before you leave here today.